I should have known the night would end in disaster when Ryan Ellis showed up to the quarterly investor dinner already 3 drinks deep. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, and he had that glassy-eyed confidence that comes from never being told no in your entire privileged life. We were at the Rosewood Grand Ballroom, one of those venues that charges $200 a plate for rubber chicken and calls it networking. I wore a simple black pantsuit from Nordstrom Rack, same one I'd recycled for the past 4 events, because unlike some people, I didn't need designer labels to prove I belonged in the room. I'm Nora Whitaker, and for the past 9 years, I'd been the director of strategic development at Harrington & Cole, a mid-sized tech consultancy that punched above its weight class. I say, had been, because what happened that night set off a chain reaction that would either destroy my career or redefine it entirely. Spoiler alert, I wasn't the one who ended up destroyed. The dinner was going smoothly enough. Investors were mingling, executives were glad-handing, and I was making my rounds, ensuring our key stakeholders knew that the Q3 numbers they were celebrating didn't happen by accident. They happened because my team had executed a flawless product launch, navigated 2 major client crises, and somehow managed to exceed revenue projections by 18% while the rest of the company was busy attending leadership retreats about synergy. Ryan, the CEO's golden child and newly appointed VP of Innovation, a title that meant absolutely nothing, decided to take the stage around 9:30. He grabbed the microphone like he was about to drop a TED Talk that would change humanity. His father, Gregory Ellis, our CEO, watched from the corner with that familiar expression of parental delusion, the kind that mistakes nepotism for natural talent. I want to take a moment, Ryan slurred slightly into the mic, to talk about the incredible momentum we've built this quarter. He paused for effect, swaying just enough that I wondered if anyone else noticed. Under my leadership, we've seen unprecedented growth in client acquisition and retention. I nearly choked on my wine. My leadership. The man had been in his role for exactly 7 months and had spent most of that time rebranding initiatives I'd already completed and taking credit for strategies he couldn't even pronounce correctly. Our conversion rates, he continued, gesturing wildly with his whiskey glass, have increased by 42%, which is a direct result of the innovative frameworks I implemented. That was it. That was the line that made my jaw clench. Those conversion rates came from a complete overhaul of our client onboarding process, a project I'd championed for 2 years while Ryan was still figuring out how to use Salesforce. I didn't plan to say anything. I really didn't. But then he looked directly at me, smirked, and added, "Sometimes you just need fresh vision to take things to the next level." Fresh vision. Like I was some relic collecting dust in the corner. I raised my hand, not aggressively, just enough to catch his attention. "Ryan, quick clarification," I said, voice steady and professional. "The 42% increase actually came from the automated workflow system we launched in Q2 before your role transition. But I appreciate you highlighting the numbers." The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Just that brief pause that happens when someone states a fact that disrupts a carefully constructed narrative. A few people nodded. One investor actually pulled out her phone, probably checking her notes. Ryan's smile froze on his face like a screenshot buffering. "Right," he said slowly, his voice tight. "Team effort. Of course." He stumbled through the rest of his speech, then practically lunged off the stage. I thought that would be the end of it. A minor correction, a small moment of accountability. Instead, it became the spark that lit a very expensive fire. About 20 minutes later, I was standing near the bar, chatting with one of our senior developers about the upcoming sprint planning. I felt someone bump into me from behind hard enough that I stumbled forward. My wine sloshed but didn't spill. I turned around and there was Ryan holding a fresh glass of whiskey, staring at me with eyes that had gone from glassy to hostile. "Careful," I said lightly, steadying myself. He didn't apologize. He just stood there, swaying slightly, and then, in a move that felt like it happened in slow motion, he tilted his glass and poured the entire contents onto my shoes. Amber liquid splashed across my black heels, soaked into the hem of my pants, and pooled on the polished marble floor. The sharp scent of expensive scotch filled the air between us. I looked down at the puddle, then up at him. His face was flushed, his jaw set in that petulant way that screamed unresolved childhood issues. "Oops," he said flatly. I waited for the apology. It didn't come. Instead, he leaned in close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath and said, "Maybe you should clean that up, Nora." Since you're so good at handling the details everyone else misses. A few people nearby had stopped talking. I could feel eyes on us, that prickly awareness that comes when a room senses conflict. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed neutral. I was good at that. 9 years of corporate survival had taught me how to swallow rage and smile through humiliation. I'm good, thanks, I said evenly, stepping back from the puddle. Ryan's mouth twisted into something between a grin and a sneer. No, seriously. Get on your knees and clean it up. You made the mess by getting in the way. The room didn't just go quiet this time. It went silent. The kind of silence where you can hear ice cubes shifting in glasses and the faint hum of the air conditioning. Someone coughed. Another person's phone buzzed. But nobody said a word. I stared at him, my pulse hammering in my ears. Part of me wanted to throw my own drink in his face. Part of me wanted to walk out and never come back. But the part of me that had clawed my way up from junior analyst to director, the part that had survived budget cuts, bad bosses, and endless meetings where I was the only woman in the room, that part stayed calm. I smiled. Not a real smile. The smile I reserve for people who have no idea how badly they've just miscalculated. I'll pass, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked away, shoes squelching slightly with every step. Behind me I heard someone laugh nervously. Ryan said something else, but I didn't catch it. I just kept walking out of the ballroom, down the hall, and straight into the women's restroom, where I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe through the adrenaline shaking my hands. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But crying felt like giving him something he didn't deserve. So I just stood there staring at my ruined shoes and thought, this is it. This is the moment everything changes. I had no idea how right I was. Now, before I go any further, if you're listening to this and thinking, damn Nora, this is intense, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Seriously. Costs you nothing, takes 2 seconds, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this matter. Most people scroll past without clicking, but that little red button makes all the difference. Alright, back to the catastrophe. I got home around 11, stripped off my whiskey-soaked clothes, and stood in the shower until the water ran cold. My phone was buzzing on the bathroom counter, texts from coworkers who'd witnessed the scene. Some were supportive. Others were just fishing for gossip. I ignored all of them. What I couldn't ignore was the sick feeling in my stomach, the certainty that this wasn't over. Men like Ryan don't get publicly corrected and privately humiliated without finding a way to rewrite the story. And in corporate America, the person with the title always gets to hold the pen. I went to bed but didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over, wondering if I should have just stayed quiet, if I should have let him take credit, if I should have cleaned up the damn whiskey just to avoid whatever was coming next. By 6 a.m. I was already awake, dressed, and sitting at my kitchen table with coffee strong enough to strip paint. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Mandatory meeting. 8:30 a.m. No agenda listed. My blood went cold. Mandatory HR meetings with no context are never good news. They're the corporate equivalent of, we need to talk, from a partner who's already mentally moved out. I stared at the notification, my stomach twisting into knots, and thought about all the ways this could go sideways. By 7:45 I was in the office. The building was quiet, most people hadn't arrived yet. I walked past the rows of empty cubicles, past the conference rooms still dark, and headed straight for my office. I needed to check something. A hunch. A terrible, nagging suspicion that had kept me awake all night. I logged into my computer and navigated to the shared drive where we kept all our major contracts, NDAs, and partnership agreements. I'd been with the company long enough to know where the important documents lived, the ones that executives forgot about until they needed them. I opened the folder labeled Series C Funding Final Terms, and scrolled through the files. There were dozens of them, investor decks, term sheets, compliance forms. But I was looking for one specific document, the one I'd helped draft 2 years ago when our lead investor insisted on continuity protections. And there it was. Key Personnel Agreement, Binding Clauses. I clicked it open and scanned through the legal jargon, the whereas clauses, and the party designations. And then I found it. Section 7, Subsection C. In the event of termination, resignation, or reassignment of any individual designated as key personnel, written consent must be obtained from said individual and submitted to the primary investor for approval. Failure to obtain such consent will result in the suspension of all funding disbursements and may trigger renegotiation of investment terms. My name was listed. Right there. Nora Whitaker, Director of Strategic Development. Key personnel. I'd insisted on that language during the negotiations. Our investors had been nervous about leadership turnover, and I'd argued that protecting key roles would give them confidence in our stability. At the time, it seemed like a smart safeguard for the company. Now, sitting in my dimly lit office at 7:50 in the morning, it felt like a nuclear option I didn't know I'd been carrying. I forwarded the document to my personal email, then deleted the sent item and cleared the trash. Call it paranoia, but I'd seen too many people get locked out of their accounts mid-termination to trust the system. At 8:25, I walked into the HR conference room. Sitting at the table were 3 people. Diane from HR, a woman in her 50s with the permanent expression of someone who'd been delivering bad news for 2 decades. Roger, our Chief Operating Officer, Gregory Ellis's right hand and professional yes man. And Ryan. Of course Ryan. He didn't look hungover. He looked smug. His hair was perfectly styled, his shirt pressed, his expression neutral but with just enough satisfaction in his eyes to make my skin crawl. Nobody offered me coffee. Nobody asked how I was doing. Diane just gestured to the empty chair across from them like I was about to be deposed. Nora, thank you for coming, Diane said, her voice flat and rehearsed. We need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your conduct. I didn't sit. Not yet. I just looked at her, then at Roger, then at Ryan, who was staring at the table like he was trying to will himself invisible. High conduct, I repeated slowly. Yes, Diane continued, pulling out a printed document. There have been reports of disruptive behavior, insubordination, and creating a hostile environment for leadership. Actually laughed. Not a loud laugh. Just a short, sharp exhale of disbelief. Disruptive behavior. You mean correcting false information during a presentation? That's not how it was perceived, Roger interjected, his voice oily and diplomatic. Leadership needs to be able to communicate without being publicly undermined. Leadership needs to communicate accurately, I shot back. Those numbers weren't subjective. They were fact. Diane cleared her throat. Regardless of intent, the perception has created friction. And last night's incident escalated things further. Last night's incident, I said slowly, where Ryan poured a drink on me and told me to clean it off the floor? Ryan finally looked up, his jaw tight. That's not what happened. Really? Because about 30 people saw it. You bumped into me, he said, his voice rising slightly. I spilled my drink accidentally and you made a scene. I stared at him, genuinely stunned by the audacity. This was gaslighting in real time, rewriting history before the ink had even dried. Nora, Diane said, pulling my attention back. We've decided that it's in everyone's best interest if we part ways. Effective immediately. The words hit like a punch to the sternum. Immediate termination. No warning, no probation, no chance to defend myself. Just gone. You're firing me, I said, my voice eerily calm. We're ending the employment relationship, Roger corrected, like the semantics mattered. You'll receive 2-week severance and we'll provide a neutral reference for future opportunities. 2 weeks. After 9 years. After building an entire division from the ground up. After saving this company more times than I could count. I looked at Ryan, who was now leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. He'd won. Or so he thought. I need that in writing, I said. Diane slid a termination letter across the table. I picked it up, scanned it quickly. Standard corporate language. Vague reasons. Immediate effective date. At the bottom, a line for my signature acknowledging receipt. I didn't sign it. Not yet. I'll need to review this with legal counsel, I said calmly. Roger's eyes narrowed. That's not necessary. This is a straightforward separation. Then you won't mind me taking a few hours to make sure I understand my rights. Diane looked at Roger. Roger looked at Ryan. The tension in the room shifted just slightly from confident dismissal to uncertain irritation. You have until end of business today, Roger said finally. After that, your access will be revoked. I nodded, folded the letter and walked out without another word. Back in my office, I closed the door and immediately called my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Charlotte Brennan who specialized in employment disputes. I'd met her at a networking event years ago and kept her card in my desk drawer just in case. Just in case had arrived. They're firing you for what? Charlotte asked, her voice incredulous. For correcting false information and not cleaning whiskey off the floor, I said flatly. She was quiet for a moment. Then, do you have documentation? Emails, witnesses, anything? Better, I said. I have a key personnel clause. I explained the Series C agreement, the binding language, the fact that my termination required investor approval. Charlotte listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she let out a low whistle. Nora, do they know about this clause? I don't think so. It's been 2 years. They probably forgot it existed. Okay, she said, her voice shifting into strategist mode. Don't sign anything. Forward me everything you have. Nora. Don't contact them. Let them come to you. I hung up and sat in my office, staring at the stack of awards and certifications on my wall. Employee of the Year. Innovation Leadership. Strategic Excellence. All meaningless now, just paper and plastic gathering dust. But buried in a contract they'd forgotten about was something that wasn't meaningless. It was leverage. And leverage in the right hands could move mountains. Or in this case, topple a CEO's spoiled son from his unearned throne. I spent the next hour quietly packing my things. Not everything, just the essentials. My notebooks, my external hard drive, a few personal photos. I left the awards on the wall. Let them keep the trophies. I was taking something far more valuable. As I walked out of the building for what I assumed might be the last time, I passed Ryan in the hallway. He was talking on his phone, laughing about something, completely unbothered. He didn't even look at me. That was fine. He'd look soon enough. By the time I got home, Charlotte had already reviewed the key personnel agreement and sent me a preliminary strategy memo. The subject line read, "You're holding all the cards." I opened it and read through her analysis. The clause was ironclad. Any termination of key personnel required written consent from the affected individual and approval from the lead investor. Without both, the Series C funding, all $48 million of it, could be frozen or even recalled. More importantly, the clause gave me negotiating power. I could refuse to consent. I could demand conditions. I could, if I wanted, bring the entire operation to a screeching halt until they met my terms. Charlotte's advice was simple. Let them realize what they've done. Then we talk. So I waited. I didn't call. I didn't email. I just waited. It took 36 hours. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, another call. Then a text from Diane in HR asking me to touch base at my earliest convenience. I didn't respond. An hour later, Roger called. Then Gregory Ellis himself, the CEO, leaving a voicemail that started with, "Nora, let's talk this through like adults," and ended with, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That's what we were calling it now. Thursday morning, Charlotte received a call from the company's legal counsel. They wanted to schedule a meeting. Urgent. Could we come in tomorrow? Tell them no, I said. If they want to talk, they can come to us. Charlotte grinned. I like your style. By Friday, the panic had fully set in. I knew because I started getting texts from former colleagues. Cryptic messages like, "What's going on?" And "There's a lockdown on all new spending," and my personal favorite. Ryan just got pulled into a meeting with the entire exec team and he looked like he was going to puke. That's when I knew. They'd figured it out. Someone, probably their lawyer, had finally gone back through the Series C documents and found the clause with my name on it. And now they were realizing that firing me wasn't just a bad decision. It was a legal catastrophe. Saturday afternoon, Gregory Ellis showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting it. I was in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, drinking tea and watching a documentary about financial fraud. The irony wasn't lost on me. When the doorbell rang, I checked the peephole and saw him standing there alone, looking significantly less composed than usual. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Nora," he said, his voice tired. "Can we talk?" "You can talk," I said. "I'll listen." He nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. "I made a mistake. We made a mistake. Ryan's behavior at the gala was unacceptable, and the way we handled your termination was wrong." "Okay," I said, waiting for more. "I want to fix this," he continued. "I want you to come back. Full reinstatement, back pay, will even add a formal apology to your file." I leaned against the doorframe. "And Ryan?" Gregory's jaw tightened. "Ryan will issue an apology. Privately. Professionally." Will he face any consequences? Silence. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Nora, please, Gregory said, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. You know how important you are to this company. You know what you've built. Let's not throw that away over one bad night. One bad night, I repeated. Gregory, your son poured a drink on me and told me to clean it off the floor. Then I got fired for not tolerating public humiliation. That's not one bad night. That's a pattern of behavior that you've enabled for years. I know, he said quietly. And I'm sorry. But we can move past this. We can make it right. Here's the thing, I said, my voice steady. I don't want to come back. Not to report to Roger, not to work alongside Ryan, not to pretend like everything's fine when we both know it's not. Gregory's face fell. Then what do you want? I smiled. Not warmly. I want to talk terms. But not with you. With your lawyers, your board, and your investors. And I want it in writing. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll set it up. Good, I said. And Gregory? Next time someone tells you your son is a problem, listen. I closed the door before he could respond. The formal meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Neutral location, a conference room at Charlotte's law firm. Present would be Gregory Ellis, Roger, the company's general counsel, a representative from our lead investor, and of course Ryan. Charlotte and I spent the weekend preparing. We drafted a list of terms, non-negotiable conditions that would need to be met before I'd even consider signing off on my termination. When Wednesday arrived, I dressed carefully. Not in my usual business casual, but in a sharp charcoal suit I'd bought specifically for this meeting. Power armor. I wanted them to see me not as the woman they'd fired, but as the woman who held their future in her hands. We arrived 10 minutes early. The conference room was large, glass-walled, with a long table that could seat 20. I took a seat at the head of the table. Charlotte sat beside me. We spread out our documents, our notes, our copy of the key personnel agreement highlighted and tabbed. When they walked in, Gregory was in front, followed by Roger, their lawyer Andrew, and finally Ryan, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The investor rep, a woman named Helen Cartwright, came in last. She was in her 60s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp gaze that suggested she'd built her fortune by never missing a detail. Everyone sat. Nobody made small talk. Andrew, the company lawyer, cleared his throat. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We'd like to discuss a path forward that works for everyone. I'm listening, I said. He slid a document across the table. We're prepared to offer full reinstatement with a 15% salary increase, expanded benefits, and a formal retraction of the termination from your record. I picked up the document, skimmed it, and slid it back. Not interested. Gregory leaned forward. Nora, that's a generous offer. It's an offer that requires me to go back to an environment where I was publicly humiliated and then fired for speaking up. Pass. Helen, the investor, spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Ms. Whitaker, I've reviewed the key personnel clause. It's clear that your consent is required for any separation to be valid under our investment agreement. Without your signature, we have a problem. I'm aware, I said. So what would it take for you to provide that consent? I glanced at Charlotte, who nodded. I opened my folder and slid my own document across the table. These are my terms, I said. Full review, non-negotiable. Andrew picked it up and started reading. His expression shifted from professional neutrality to barely concealed alarm. Gregory reached over and read over his shoulder. Roger went pale. Ryan didn't even try to look. Andrew started, then stopped. This is extensive. It's fair, I corrected. My terms were simple. I would sign off on my termination and release Harrington and Cole from the key personnel obligation under the following conditions. 1. A formal public apology from Ryan Ellis, delivered in writing and shared with all staff, acknowledging his behavior and accepting full responsibility. 2. Ryan's removal from any leadership position for a minimum of 1 year, with mandatory executive coaching and a performance review before reinstatement. 3. A settlement payment equivalent to 2 years' salary, paid in full within 30 days. 4. A comprehensive review of the company's harassment and retaliation policies, conducted by an external firm with implementation of all recommended changes. 5. A non-disparagement agreement that worked both ways, preventing the company from speaking negatively about me and vice versa. And 6. A formal letter of recommendation from Gregory Ellis, acknowledging my contributions and supporting any future employment opportunities. The room was silent as they absorbed the list. Finally, Gregory spoke. "You want me to demote my son. I want you to hold him accountable," I said. "The same way you would any other employee who behaved that way." "This is punitive," Roger said, his voice tight. "No," Helen interjected, looking at him coolly. "This is consequence. And frankly, it's less than what I would have demanded." Ryan, who'd been silent the entire time, finally spoke. "This is bullshit. You're trying to ruin my career over an accident." I turned to him, my voice calm. "You poured a drink on me and told me to get on my knees in front of our investors. Then you had me fired when I refused. That wasn't an accident. That was cruelty. And now you're facing the result." "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I said. "You meant every word. You just didn't think there would be consequences." Gregory held up a hand. "Let's take a break. Give us some time to discuss this internally." Charlotte and I stepped out into the hallway. I could feel my hands shaking, adrenaline and relief mixing into something electric. Through the glass wall I could see them arguing. Ryan was gesturing wildly. Roger looked furious. Helen sat calmly, arms crossed, clearly unmoved by their protests. "How do you think it's going?" I asked Charlotte quietly. He grinned. "I think you just made grown men cry." After 20 minutes they called us back in. Gregory looked older somehow, like the meeting had aged him in real time. "We accept your terms," he said quietly. "All of them." I felt something release in my chest, a pressure I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "In writing. Today." Andrew nodded. "We'll draft the agreement and have it to you by end of business." Helen stood and walked around the table. She extended her hand to me. "Ms. Whitaker, I want to apologize on behalf of the investment group. We should have been more attentive to the culture here. That's on us." I shook her hand. "Thank you." He glanced at Ryan, then back at me. "For what it's worth, I think you just saved this company from itself." As Charlotte and I left the building, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not victorious exactly. Just free. Free from the weight of tolerating bad behavior, from the expectation that I should just accept humiliation with a smile, from the belief that speaking up would cost me everything. It had cost me something. But I'd gotten something back too. My dignity. My worth. And the satisfaction of knowing that for once, the right person faced consequences. 3 days later, the company-wide email went out. It was brief, professional, and to the point. Effective immediately, Ryan Ellis will be stepping back from his role as VP of Innovation to focus on professional development and leadership training. We remain committed to fostering a respectful and accountable workplace culture. No details. No drama. Just the quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. I received my settlement payment exactly 29 days later. The check arrived by courier, along with a handwritten note from Gregory. "Nora, you were right. About all of it. I hope someday you can forgive me for not seeing it sooner. Gregory." I didn't frame the note. But I didn't throw it away either. I just tucked it into a drawer and moved on. Because here's the thing about corporate revenge. It's not really about revenge at all. It's about correction. About forcing systems that protect the wrong people to finally do the right thing. I didn't go back to Harrington and Cole. I didn't need to. Within 2 months, I had 3 job offers from competitors who'd heard through the grapevine what had happened. Apparently, standing up to powerful men and winning makes you pretty marketable. I took a position as Chief Strategy Officer at a smaller firm, one with a female CEO and a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. The pay was better. The culture was healthier. And nobody ever told me to clean anything off the floor. 6 months after the settlement, I ran into Ryan at an industry conference. He was standing near the coffee station, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed too tight. When he saw me, he froze. I could have walked past. Could have pretended I didn't see him. But I didn't. I walked right up to him, smiled, and said, "Ryan." He swallowed hard. "Nora." "Hi. How's the executive coaching going?" I asked pleasantly. His jaw tightened. "It's fine." "Good," I said. "I hope you're learning a lot." He nodded stiffly, clearly desperate to escape. I let him suffer for another moment, then walked away, coffee in hand, feeling absolutely zero sympathy. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. It's just living well, succeeding loudly, and knowing that the person who tried to break you is stuck watching you thrive. That night, I got a text from Charlotte. Just 3 words and a champagne emoji. "You earned it." I smiled, poured myself a glass of wine, and toasted to myself in my quiet apartment. To key personnel clauses. To contracts people forget about. To women who refuse to drink from the floor. And to the beautiful, poetic justice of watching arrogance meet consequence. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. No dramatic boardroom showdowns, no tearful reconciliations, just the slow, grinding machinery of accountability finally starting to turn. Harrington and Cole implemented the policy changes within 3 months. They brought in an external firm that conducted interviews, reviewed documentation, and produced a scathing 50-page report about the company's culture of favoritism and unchecked behavior. I heard through former colleagues that the report specifically cited Ryan's tenure as a case study in failed leadership accountability. Apparently, multiple people came forward with their own stories once they felt safe enough to speak. Nothing as egregious as what happened to me, but a pattern nonetheless. Dismissiveness, credit theft, inappropriate comments that were always laughed off as jokes. The board mandated quarterly culture audits. Gregory Ellis stepped down as CEO 8 months later, citing a desire to spend more time with family. Everyone knew that was corporate speak for "I was forced out," but the press release was polite enough. Roger left shortly after, taking a position at a company I'd never heard of, probably padding his resume with accomplishments that weren't his. Ryan completed his executive coaching. From what I understand, he's now working in a mid-level business development role at a different firm, one where his last name carries no weight. I don't follow his career. I don't need to. But I heard he's doing fine, which is more than he deserved but less than he expected. Sometimes that's justice enough. As for me, I never looked back. My new role at Kelso and Grant was everything Harrington and Cole should have been. The CEO, Amanda Kelso, was a former litigator who'd built the firm from the ground up. She had zero patience for incompetence and even less for harassment. During my first week, she pulled me aside and said, "I heard about what happened at your last place. That will never happen here. And if it does, you come directly to me." I believed her. And 6 months in, I still do. The story could end there. Woman stands up, gets justice, moves on to better things. But there's one more chapter, a postscript that happened almost a year after the settlement. I was speaking at a Women in Business conference, talking about strategic leadership and navigating corporate politics. During the Q&A, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. "How do you deal with being undermined by someone more senior?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Especially when you know you're right but no one will listen?" I thought about that question for a moment, really thought about it before answering. "You document everything," I said. "You build relationships with people who see your value. And you never, ever assume that being right is enough. You need leverage, whether that's a contract clause, a key relationship, or just the willingness to walk away. Because the truth is, most systems aren't built to protect people like us. So we have to protect ourselves." She nodded, writing furiously in her notebook. After the session, she came up to me. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I needed to hear that." "Are you okay?" I asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm dealing with something similar. Not exactly the same, but close." I pulled out my phone and texted her Charlotte's contact information. "Call this lawyer. Tell her I sent you. She'll help you figure out your options." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I can't afford." "Just call her," I said. "She does pro bono work for cases like yours. And if she can't help directly, she'll know someone who can." She thanked me 3 more times before leaving, clutching the business card I'd handed her like it was a lifeline. Maybe it was. That's the thing about surviving something like this. You don't just move on. You become a lighthouse for other people trying to navigate the same dark waters. You share the map, you hand out life preservers, you tell the truth about what happened so that others know they're not alone. I've told this story a dozen times now. At conferences, in mentorship sessions, over coffee with women who've been gaslit, undermined, and pushed out for the crime of being competent while female. Every time I tell it, I see the same reaction. Relief. Recognition. The realization that it's not just them, that the system is rigged and that sometimes, just sometimes, you can rig it back. People always ask me the same question at the end. Aren't you angry? Don't you wish you were still there, proving them wrong? And my answer is always the same. No. Because staying would have meant accepting that what happened was okay. It would have meant normalizing Ryan's behavior, pretending that Gregory's apology fixed years of negligence, going back to a place that only valued me when losing me became expensive. I'm not angry anymore. Anger is exhausting and I spent too many years being tired. What I feel now is something calmer, more permanent. Resolve. The bone-deep certainty that I deserve better, that we all deserve better, and that sometimes the only way to get it is to be willing to burn the bridge and build a new one somewhere else. The settlement money helped, obviously. I won't pretend it didn't. 2 years' salary bought me breathing room, the luxury of being selective, the ability to say no to opportunities that felt wrong without panicking about rent. But the real prize wasn't the check. It was the precedent. Because now, somewhere in the corporate files of Harrington and Cole, there's a case study about what happens when you underestimate someone. When you assume that humiliation and termination will make a problem disappear instead of making it exponentially worse. When you forget that the people you dismiss are often the ones holding the architecture together. I think about that sometimes. About all the contracts being signed right now with clauses nobody's reading carefully. About all the key personnel designations that seem like legal boilerplate until suddenly they're not. About every person who's been told to sit down, be quiet, clean up the mess and smile while doing it. Some of them are reading contracts right now. Some of them are forwarding documents to personal emails. Some of them are sitting in HR meetings being told their employment is terminated effective immediately and they're thinking, wait, there was that clause. The one from 2 years ago. The one they've definitely forgotten about. I hope they find it. I hope they call lawyers like Charlotte who know exactly what to do with leverage when it appears. I hope they negotiate terms that make boardrooms uncomfortable and executives accountable. I hope they walk away with their dignity intact and their bank accounts padded, headed toward something better. Because here's what I learned from all of this. The system doesn't protect you until you force it to. Fairness isn't distributed equally. It's negotiated, fought for, sometimes dragged kicking and screaming into the light. And the people who benefit most from the status quo will always tell you that rocking the boat is unprofessional, that speaking up is divisive, that expecting consequences for bad behavior is somehow vindictive. They're wrong. And deep down they know they're wrong. That's why they panic when the leverage shifts. That's why Gregory showed up at my apartment. That's why Helen Cartwright, the investor, looked at Ryan with barely concealed contempt and told him he was getting exactly what he deserved. That's why the settlement included every single term I demanded, because they knew finally that they had no choice. The last time I spoke to anyone from Harrington and Cole was about 4 months ago. I got an email from one of the junior analysts I'd mentored, a brilliant woman named Claire who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times despite exceeding every metric. Nora, she wrote, I just wanted you to know that things are different here now. Really different. They promoted me to senior analyst and they've started actually listening when we point out problems. I know it's not perfect, but it's better. And I know that's because of what you did. I replied with congratulations and encouragement, told her she'd earned every bit of that promotion. But privately I felt something I hadn't expected. Not vindication exactly. More like completion. The sense that the story had ended the way it needed to, not with perfection but with progress. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just let it go. If I'd signed the termination letter that day in HR without reviewing it, without remembering the clause, without calling Charlotte. I'd probably have found another job eventually. I'm good at what I do. Someone would have hired me. But I would have carried the weight of that humiliation forever. The knowledge that I'd been discarded like trash, that Ryan had faced 0 consequences, that the system had worked exactly as designed, protecting powerful men and disposing of inconvenient women. I would have swallowed that bitter pill and told myself it was just how things worked. Instead, I forced them to choke on their own arrogance. I made them face the cost of their cruelty. I turned their weapon, my own supposed disposability, into a shield and then a sword. And I walked away knowing that I'd changed something, not just for myself but for every person who came after me at that company. That's worth more than any title, any salary, any corner office. It's the knowledge that you didn't just survive. You shifted the terrain. You made it harder for the next Ryan Ellis to destroy someone's career over wounded pride. You made it more expensive for the next Gregory Ellis to look the other way while his son behaved like a tyrant in training. You made them remember that some people can't be erased. Some clauses can't be ignored. And some women refuse to drink from the goddamn floor. Epilogue. 2 years later. I'm sitting in my office at Kelso and Grant, corner suite with windows overlooking the city, when my assistant knocks on the door. Someone's here to see you, she says. Says it's personal. Ryan Ellis. My stomach does a small flip. I haven't seen or spoken to Ryan since that awkward encounter at the conference. I consider telling her to send him away, but curiosity wins. Give me 5 minutes, then send him in. When Ryan walks through the door, he looks different. Older maybe, though only 2 years have passed. More worn. The cocky swagger is gone, replaced by something that looks almost like humility. Almost. Nora, he says, standing awkwardly near the door. Thanks for seeing me. I don't stand. Don't offer him a seat. Just look at him and wait. He shifts his weight, clears his throat. I know this is unexpected. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the corporate mandated version. Okay, I say neutrally. What I did to you was inexcusable, he continues, the words sounding rehearsed but sincere. I was drunk, I was embarrassed, and I took it out on you in the worst possible way. And then I made it worse by trying to destroy your career. I've spent the last 2 years in therapy trying to figure out why I thought any of that was acceptable, and honestly I still don't have a good answer. Except that I was raised to believe I could do whatever I wanted without consequences, and you were the first person who proved that wrong. I lean back in my chair studying him. Why are you here, Ryan? Why now? He exhales slowly. Because my therapist said I needed to make amends. But also because you deserved better, and I wanted you to know that I finally understand that. Do you want me to forgive you? I ask. He shakes his head. No. I don't think I deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And that what you did, holding us accountable, it needed to happen. I hated you for it at the time. But you were right. We sit in silence for a moment. Part of me wants to tear into him, to list every way he made my life hell, to remind him of the whiskey on my shoes and the smugness on his face. But another part of me, the part that's moved on and built something better, just feels tired. Apology noted, I say finally. Was there anything else? He nods, turning to leave, then pauses at the door. For what it's worth, you're exactly where you should be. And I'm exactly where I deserve to be. I hope you're happy, Nora. I am, I say. And I mean it. After he leaves, I sit quietly for a few minutes, processing the unexpected visit. My assistant pokes her head back in. You okay, boss? Yeah, I say, smiling. I really am. That night, I get a text from Charlotte. Guess who just took on a case involving a key personnel clause at a tech startup? Your legacy lives on. I send back a champagne emoji and a simple message. Give them hell. Because that's the thing about breaking cycles. Once you do it once, you show other people it's possible. The path gets a little clearer, the tools a little more familiar, the courage a little more accessible. You become proof that the system can bend, that power can shift, that justice, real justice, sometimes actually happens. I didn't set out to be a cautionary tale or an inspiration. I just refused to accept that humiliation was the price of employment. I got lucky, in a way, lucky that I'd thought to include that clause 2 years earlier, lucky that I'd kept good documentation, lucky that I had a lawyer who knew exactly how to wield leverage like a scalpel. But luck only matters if you're paying attention. If you're reading the contracts, building the relationships, saving the emails, knowing your worth even when everyone around you suggests you're worthless. So here's my advice, the same advice I give to every young woman who emails me asking how to survive a corporate world that seems designed to chew her up and spit her out. Document everything. Read every contract. Know your value and make sure it's protected in writing. Build relationships with people who have power and use it wisely. Find mentors who will tell you the truth and lawyers who will fight when necessary. And never, ever accept humiliation as the cost of having a career. Because somewhere in those contracts, in those budgets, in those organizational charts, there's leverage. There's a clause, a relationship, a skill set, something that makes you less replaceable than they want you to believe. Find it. Protect it. And when the moment comes, and it will come, use it. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. But out of the simple, radical belief that you deserve better. That we all deserve better. That the next generation shouldn't have to negotiate their dignity, shouldn't have to choose between speaking up and keeping their jobs, shouldn't have to clean whiskey off the floor while powerful men watch and laugh. The world changes one contract clause at a time. One documented conversation. One woman who refuses to disappear quietly. One key personnel designation that turns out to be the leverage that topples a kingdom of mediocrity. I didn't burn Harrington and Cole down. I didn't have to. I just held up a mirror and made them look at what they'd built, what they'd protected, what they'd allowed to flourish in the name of keeping the peace and maintaining the hierarchy. And when they finally saw it, really saw it, they had no choice but to change. Not because they wanted to, but because I made it more expensive not to. That's power. That's leverage. That's what happens when you read the fine print and refuse to be erased. So the next time someone tells you to get on your knees and clean up their mess, remember this story. Remember that somewhere in the paperwork, in the contracts they made you sign, in the systems they assume you don't understand, there might be a clause with your name on it. Find it. Use it. Make them remember that some people can't be thrown away just because it's convenient. And then walk out the door toward something better, knowing you left the place a little more accountable than you found it. That's not revenge. That's renovation. And sometimes it's the only way to fix what's broken.